Section 6.2 is the Enlightenment's impact on society. Maisie Jane is here for this Padeo, aren't you? Because someone wouldn't take a nap. So this section is extremely important to understanding the Enlightenment, because 6.1 was basically about, what the Enlightenment's about, but now we're going to look at it practically and see how the Enlightenment's ideas impact different areas of society. Most directly, I guess, impacting economics, religion, and the arts. So as you see the menu, it's real simple. I mean, this is basically what it comes down to, is how does the Enlightenment impact economics in Europe, how does it impact religion, and how does it impact the arts? So it's like a mini Sprite. And then 6.3, we'll kind of get into the politics of it and how the Enlightenment was impacting the political situation as well, and that extends on later. So we'll see how long this goes with Maisie here as she's reaching for everything, and we'll undoubtedly grab and try to take off my glasses. So let's go ahead and dive in. Economics pre-Enlightenment. It's based on monism. You should know it. It is what? Mercantilism, exactly right. So mercantilism is the way that before the Enlightenment, countries kind of directed or dictated their economic situation. The goal, again, is for a country to become economically self-sufficient. You want to be able to control your economic destiny without the help of any other country. If you have to depend on somebody else, remember, if you send them wealth, that takes away power. So you want to make sure that you can... We just had trouble down below, if you know what I'm saying. Exactly. You want to make sure that your economic situation is not dependent on another country. Wealth stays in, trade works to your advantage. Colonies have to be there because they produce you raw materials and they give you a favorable balance of trade. You want to be sending more exports out to other countries than bringing them in. Okay? Colonies make your raw materials, your resources, then you create all your goods and you sell them to other countries and you get their wealth. You then can use that wealth to make your military awesome. The government also is controlling all economic functions. So the government's in charge. The individual's interest is not as significant or important in the mercantile system. It's all what a country needs the most. Now, we have started to see with the commercial revolution, we've started to see little bits of capitalism, though, get into society, but it's mostly just the middle class that are really engaging in that. Most, though, countries, especially your countries where you see an absolute monarchy, so France, Spain, England for a while, are going to be mercantile because the government is strong enough to control all the economics in that country. If you get a country like the Netherlands and eventually England as well, you're going to see more of the middle class determining the economic situation. So again, connection between monarchy and economic situation. The more absolute monarchy they have, the more mercantile they have, particularly in Western Europe, where mercantilism, depending on colonies, you have the colonies there anyway. So with that in mind, things start to change. We'll spend just a little second here on what's called the physiocrats. The physiocrats are a French agricultural group led by Francois Quinet. He is anti-mercantile. What he's saying is that we need, as in the businessmen of the middle class, the businessmen in the middle class, we need to have more significance and more of a say in the goings-on in our agricultural market. Farmers should have the power to make individual decisions to sell what they want and when they want. They need to be individual actors and not pawns for the country or for the state. So farmers should have the power to make decisions. If nobody's eating kale, don't grow kale, right? I mean, just because we don't have to have everything, because sometimes I feel like you just do something for the sake of doing it. Well, if there's not an interest or demand for it, why are you making it, right? Maisie, if she doesn't want squash as baby food, she loves squash, but if she doesn't want it and no babies like it, why are they making squash, right? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So farmers should have the ability to dictate what is important to them to grow. Okay, ag production is down also, Kine argues, as the government has too much control of the land. And again, wealth equals land. So in his idea, if you let the farmers decide, it's going to bring more wealth to them, and that's going to in turn help the entire country. Individual over government. Now, we get to the big, I'm struggling with my words, Maisie. What's the word? She has none. I'm going to put Maisie down on the floor. Let's see how this works. Okay. Hey. Uh-oh, she's after the wire. I can tell. Okay. Adam Smith writes one of the most important works of economic theory of all time. It's called The Wealth of Nations, the year 1776. Kind of an important year. Now, basically kind of the loose association, the middle school connection here, is that Adam Smith and his theories equal capitalism and what capitalism is all about. Now, let me get more specific. First of all, Adam Smith says that trade can help both countries. And what I mean by that is that if a country A specializes in something, let's say they make rocking chairs. Country B makes, the game you have at like Cracker Barrel where you like put the keys in. Let's just say a board game, Monopoly, board games in particular, okay? What he's saying is that each country doesn't have to make everything. Countries can specialize in certain goods and then make a lot of them and then trade the surplus to another country for their good that they're good at, right? We don't have to worry about trying to make everything. Let's specialize in something so that everybody's got a product that's great. Does that make sense? So I take, like, here's this ridiculous looking candlestick, right? If my country makes these candlesticks like out the wazoo and they're so awesome, we don't have to spend time making, what else do I have here? Stuffed animals, right? We don't have to waste our time doing that because we can trade it for country B because they make really good stuffed animals. So it's all about doing what you do well and then working together with other countries to get what works best. Smith argues, yes, I know. Smith argues that government then should stay out of the economy if at all possible. And this kind of piggybacks on what the physiocrats were arguing. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes the government doesn't make the best decisions that on economic ideas because individuals know the market better, or they know their interests, their demand, their supply better. So Smith argues that government should stay out of the economy if all possible and let individuals make decisions. And he argued for this concept called laissez-faire, which is a French phrase, in other words, means leave things alone, hands off. Government, don't get involved. Let individuals make decisions in the market that are best. And because of that, what he argues is that this idea called the invisible hand will guide the market. And what the invisible hand would do is, let's say, for instance, you're buying these candlesticks again, okay? Very popular around Christmas. Well, demand for these around Christmas is going to be very high, okay? You want your candles. It's a very nice affair, right? When you have your Christmas music that you play after Thanksgiving, and it's going to be great. If demand is high, then what's going to happen to the price? Price is going to go up. But then we get into January, and everyone forgets about candles, and then supply is going to go up because the demand goes down for those. What's going to happen to the price? The price is going to go down. So Adam Smith says government never made the choice to move the market any or move the price at all. They didn't make the decision. It's the individual actors in the market that made the decision, and that we as human beings have the ability to decide what is an appropriate price. We have that capability, and the government shouldn't have to dictate what to buy, what to sell, what to make, which in the case of these mercantile economies, that's in many cases what was happening. So think about connections to the Enlightenment. Think about how the Enlightenment buzzwords fit in here, and keep that idea going through all of this to say, hey, how does logic and reasoning and tolerance and progress and optimism and liberty and equality, how do all these things fit in with these different movements? So the big picture again, mercantilism. The government's mission, the government's purposes is in many cases greater than the individual because the government works as an individual unit. and it has to have more exports than imports because you have that wealth. Capitalism under Adam Smith argues that wealth can be generated from two different places. Progress can be generated from two different places. You can have goods that are made by two different countries or individual actors that bring a good product. So capitalism says the individuals are more efficient and are better served to make economic choices than the government is. So we're going to pause here for a second, and I'm going to do with Maisie. I think she has, one of those. Be right back. Oh, wait. All right, back for a little religion discussion. Now, we have talked a whole lot in our class about the impact of religion in European culture. We've talked about, obviously, the Reformation. We've talked about the Catholic Church. We've talked about Lutheran Church and Calvinism and the Anglican Church and the different varieties of Calvinism around Europe. This is something completely different because now it's the Enlightenment's impact and all of its buzzwords, its impact on religion. And deism is the thing that most symbolizes that. It is the religious arm of the Enlightenment. And what deism argues is that God is like a cosmic clockmaker. All along what's going. She is making her escape, so I'm going to have to chase her down here in a second. Deism argues that God was a cosmic clockmaker. God created the universe and then stepped back to let it work, thereby stating that God is not an actor in the world, that God is separate. He has created the universe. God exists, but it does not play a role in the goings-on of the world. So what that means is that anything that suggests that God intercedes on our behalf or is involved in the world, any sort of supernatural, religious, demonic event, anything like that, is not what you think it is. And a deist would say that the supernatural is not involved in human life and that God is not personally involved. So prayer, miracles, all of that doesn't play a role. It's very logical. It's very reason-based. If you don't have evidence for it, like an inductive or deductive reasoning, if you don't have evidence for it, it must not have happened. So this also, deism helps spring additional movements of skepticism, which is just incredible doubt, very Descartes, deductive reasoning-based philosophy, where you're just a skeptic and you're waiting for, life to prove you for whatever theories you're in. And also atheism, we start to see very minor sects of society start to question the existence of God at all. Does God even exist? A deist would say, yes, God does exist, but does not, again, have a direct impact in the world today. So again, think, logic, reasoning. How does it all connect with the Enlightenment? Now, you do see, though, the development of different Protestant faiths at this time, but they're very different than the ones we've seen before. Religion is starting to be viewed more of a private affair than public. So religion, throughout our old class, it's been questioned. Maisie's gone. I better check on her. Oh, look who I found. Okay, back to business. Again, it's been a very public affair, right? We've seen kings that are openly religious. We've seen kings dictate what their states are going to believe in terms of their religious faith. We've seen, obviously we've seen the Catholic Church be a very present and public and social factor in society. But religion is shifting gears a little bit, and it's started to be viewed something as you have inside of your home as a private affair rather than something you take into the public sphere. And a new faith to kind of illustrate that point was the Methodist faith, created and developed by a man named John Wesley. It reemphasizes an emotional relationship with God. So this is very much so a reaction to this logic and reason-based ideas of deism. Methodism says, you know what, God is real in the world, and that we can have a personal relationship with Him, and we live by sound moral principles to illustrate our connection with what God wants us to do. So it's in very much a kind of a mix between Lutheranism, which is an emotional relationship, a personal relationship with God, and then Calvinism, with you live by sound moral principles, not to be distracted by the things of this world. So again, a reaction to the reaction. The Enlightenment, a reaction to all the faith-based, you could argue superstitious-based faiths, certainly a more humanistic look at that. in that case, but it's also Methodism, a reaction to the Enlightenment and its development of religious faith. Don't worry. She's down there again. Hey, Maisie. Okay. Now, the arts. Again, public, right? A celebration of religious themes and royal power. The Baroque era. An emphasis on ornate, fancy, design-based, not design, but ornate and decorative art. But now art is changing as the 18th century develops into an emphasis on private life and the public good. It kind of mirrors what we see in religion. Okay? Now, Baroque art, again, what it was. Now, we've talked about Baroque art in the context of the church, but we also need to realize that Baroque art exists to be used also by absolute monarchs in Western Europe in trying to illustrate their glory and prestige. An absolute monarch might commission an artist to, hey, Piper, go to bed. I think I stepped on Piper. Oops. I have to referee a lot of things here at home. So anyway, what was Baroque art? It's illustrating the fancy, ornate, decorative parts of society to reflect the glory of not only the church, but absolute monarchs. We have an artist, a Baroque artist named Gian Bernini, who was well known for several sculptures in the 1600s. The one in the far right, I think it's the Ecstasy of St. Anthony, but that may not be correct. St. Teresa, I think it's the Ecstasy of St. Teresa. But anyway, you've got a David sculpture there on the left, and then you have a bust of Louis XIV there in the middle. So Bernini is showing religious items, again, glorifying certain religious stories for the church's purposes, but also glorifying absolute monarchs with this bust of Louis XIV. But again, that's kind of what we see with Baroque art. But we're shifting gears now into something else. And kind of the bridge category of that is called Rococo art. And Rococo art in the 18th century is glorifying Maisie is very loud. The life and the times of the nobility. So this painting called The Swing really best shows how the nobility lived their lives. And you see a whole movement of art called Rococo, which celebrates the lives of the rich and famous and the life and times of the nobility, and the fact that this guy's clearly looking up this woman's skirt. However, art also reflects the changing emphasis in social class. Pause. All right, back again here for the last section. It also represents the changing emphasis on social class. We've talked the whole semester about how the middle class has risen in prestige and power. The bourgeoisie, the middle class, the merchants are becoming more and more significant in society, and the art will reflect it. And we've seen, especially in the Dutch Netherlands and the Netherlands, how the art reflects that. And it increasingly reflects the outlook and values of commercial and bourgeois society. Wealth, prestige by hard work, the importation of different luxury goods, and the public showcase that I've got money and you don't, and my money is because that I've worked hard. So that's certainly something that is changing as well. Gosh, Maisie, are you silly? Yeah, you are. Oh, did you hear that? Well, someone just tooted. Okay, so last thing here is we have eventually some challenges, though, to Enlightenment thinking. Such a logical time, such a time based on reason and progress and tolerance, that some argue that you're taking the feeling and emotion out of society. And Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who we talked about briefly in 6.1 and we'll talk much more about later, Rousseau is starting to question the reliance on reason and emphasizes the role of emotion to improve self and society, that you cannot make things better just by saying, hey, let's just logically think. Let's make things better by depending on our feelings. And as we close out today, you know that Maisie's got a lot of feelings during this Padeo. But something that will track, and it's certainly true of most of history, is that when you have a time period that's based on a certain concept, eventually the thinkers are going to tire of that concept. And over the course of, say, a half century, people will start to think differently. And we'll have a period called Romanticism when we cross into the 1800s that totally runs counter to what the Enlightenment is all about. It doesn't destroy the Enlightenment, but it's going to challenge the wisdom of the Enlightenment. And when we get to our next unit, Unit 7, we're going to continue to challenge the wisdom of the Enlightenment when the Enlightenment helps unleash one of the most destructive and transformative events in world history. So we'll get there eventually, and we'll start cutting heads off and have fun with it. With that in mind, throughout this whole Padeo, go back and look at how does the Enlightenment impact arts? How does it impact religion? How does it impact economics? And don't just be able to tell me that it does. Explain to me how those different things, particularly in religion and economics, yes, connect to Enlightenment buzzwords. Okay? Very key for you to know and understand going forward, and something that in class we will certainly talk about and explain. Macy, that's about it for 6.2. You want to say goodbye? You want to wave? No? Okay. That's a little rude. We'll talk about that later. Bye.